Hello, and welcome to another Behind the Poem story. The poems I've been talking about lately are from my recently released collection, Coffee and Paper Cuts, Poetry and Prose. Now, the poem I'd like to talk to you about today is Lunacy. Just like the poem Variant Blue, Lunacy comes from or at least its beginning draft comes from a workshop that I did with my students and sixth formers, my fellow staff members in Writing for Wellbeing hour. We used a writing prompt about personifying nature or personifying a force of nature. And although I started by focusing on the moon, somehow I still ended up in the sea. I think that there's something about the depths of the sea and the way that it moves that I find particularly compelling, particularly magnetic. And Lunacy has its own illustration from a picture of a full moon that I took coming away from school one day. So it all kind of combined to tell the story of that dance that happens when with gravity and the pull of the moon on the sea, and how it can possibly inspire the crazy. We joke a lot about how the full moon affects people, and whether it's true or not, affecting people's mental health or affecting people's behavior. We all know the concept that people act a little bit crazy with the full moon, and of course that's the origin of the term lunacy, is that the moon or full moon drives people a little nuts. So lunacy as a concept tried to explore some of that madness, tried to explore some of the effect on the water or the effect of the moon on the waves, and it kind of took on a life of its own, which when you're personifying nature or you're personifying a force of nature is kind of on purpose. I have read Lunacy to a couple of open mic nights for poetry. I have read out Lunacy in the workshop itself, and since I have to be very careful when I read Lunacy, because not only did I go pretty heavy on the personification, but I also tried to develop some really kind of vivid imagery that used vocabulary focused on alliteration. And so it's a bit of a tongue twister, and it trips me up sometimes when I try to read it out loud, but I was trying really hard to get that rhythm, to get that attention-seeking concept when you know that the full moon is pulling at you, when you know that the waves are pulling at you, like it's some kind of dance between the moon and the sea and the waves in between, the wind and the water and all of that kind of thing. So Lunacy was born out of that crazy idea that the moon drives people crazy. It was born out of a workshop idea where we were personifying nature, but it was really fun to just let it go as deep as it could on personifying nature, and then just leaving it kind of hanging there as if it was a repetitive dance or a repetitive date, or that every month the moon might have this effect. I don't know. It's one of my favorite natural poems within the book, and the illustration itself took a couple of different formats. There was a different kind of style from the program that I used to create my illustrations called Deep Artifacts, which I really liked, but it was just a little bit too dark in the way it came out for illustration in the book. And so I went with that stained glass style. If you have not seen my videos about how I create my illustrations and the differences between concepts and options for my illustrations, there is a different playlist than the Behind the Poem stories called Writing Tips and Readings. And that should have all my videos prior to the release of Coffee and Paper Cuts about those illustrations and those options. The creation of the shattered kind of stained glass went along with the concept of the full moon and how it breaks up our consciousness and breaks up our sanity a little bit. The alliteration that moves back and forth through the different motions pulled on on the sea by the full moon, turning it into a dance and a competition between things, really went along together. And it's one of the more kind of exciting pairings between illustration and poem. So I know it's quite simple, and I know so this video is obviously quite short, but it was fun to write this. And I think that when we do writing, it doesn't always have to have the earth-shattering, sociological, psychological depth that some of the poems that I'm very proud of do. I'm still very proud of this poem because it's not, precisely surface only. It's got layers to it, and alternative meanings and wordplay and kind of depth to it that doesn't have to be tragic, that doesn't have to be all or nothing. Sometimes poetry can just be fun. And when I write in the writing for wellbeing workshop, that's what I try to aim to show my colleagues and students, is that sometimes writing for its own sake, just to explore an image or an idea for fun, can be just as therapeutic as exploring an emotion or an experience that you need to examine outside yourself. Lunacy is one of those. Lunacy was written just for the joy of writing. And I think we lose that sometimes when we concentrate too much on formalizing poetry, or that poetry can only be created for a vital and important purpose. Those things are important, and I try to do those things as well. But I think we also need to give ourselves permission as poets to just write something fun, to just write something that you enjoy the challenge of or the beauty of in and of itself for its own purpose. So thank you for listening to another Behind the Poem story. The poetry, as always, is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. And I hope that you enjoy listening to me not trip over the words in the audiobook as I tried to read Lunacy without getting tongue-tied or, I guess, affected by the full moon. Until next week, when I will tell you a new Behind the Poem story, I will see you on the page.